Bom, a gente vai ouvir agora, a gente vai ter mais uma convidada, que é a Hershey. Ela vem falar sobre a necessidade da gente ter flexibilidade, experimentar e evoluir a experiência do consumidor para expandir nossos negócios, trazendo uma análise profunda sobre AI agora no mundo do nosso e-commerce, e as ideias de como, em torno do que ela chama Transcendent Commerce. Bom, vamos receber aqui a Hershey, que é Research Director for Worldwide Digital Commerce at IDC. Heather, please join us. Hello, hello.
Hi everybody.
Hello, Heather. Long time no see.
I know, right? It seems like only yesterday we were here last year at VTEX Day.
Exactly. I'm sure that this is going to be amazing. I'll leave the stage with you. Please do your show.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Bye-bye.
Today we're going to talk about a lot of topics in a very condensed presentation. So I want to let you know about that up front. And one thing that I've gone ahead and done is I've translated every one of my slides into Portuguese. And I used AI to do this. I did it for a very important reason, because I want to play a little game with you while I'm presenting today. I'd like you to really focus on the translations, the quality of the translations, the syntactual errors, and anything where, maybe the idioms don't quite synchronize with what you would say as a natural speaker of Portuguese. And for everybody else who speaks English like me, don't worry, most of the presentation will still make sense too. These are the trends that I'm seeing in 2024 in my research. And for the record, I am the Research Director of Worldwide Digital Commerce at IDC. And my coverage is worldwide, and digital commerce technology is more than just the core commerce engines, the transactional engines of business themselves, but also encompasses a lot of the adjacent technologies that would plug into those commerce engines, such as PIMs, product information management systems, CPQs on the B2B side, which are configured price quote engines for sales teams, and much, much more. Personalization engines in particular are really hot. But we're going to focus mainly on one trend in particular, and it's this one here at the top. We're going to talk about transcendent commerce, which may not be a terminology that is familiar to you, but let me go ahead and give you a really high-level view of what this is supposed to represent. Transcendent commerce is a little bit like an omni-channel narrative, a little bit like a unified commerce narrative, but it's much more future-focused. It's much broader in concept. It leverages predictive analytics, clean, well-maintained data models, and generative AI technologies to transcend the traditional silos of business models, such as B2B and B2C. It helps you converge the two. It also transcends what happens when you consider the organizational hierarchies of how your entire company is designed and how you go to market in commerce. I want to tell you a little bit why this should be relevant to you. You're probably sick at this point of hearing about AI. Everything seems to be about AI, and it's been that way for over a year, right? I feel you. I also have a little bit of AI fatigue, and I went to school for it. But one of the things that I think is really important to know is that what you're seeing today is not really what the buzz is about, right? It's literally the exponential growth curve of AI technologies, which is a little foreshadowing. I'm going to go a little deeper into that in just a moment. But before I do, I would like to tell you a little bit of why this should be relevant to you. We asked 1,363 professionals which Gen AI models would be the most beneficial to them. And we asked them a whole lot more than this. But for this particular talking point, I wanted to call attention to the fact that of those 1,000+ professionals we surveyed at IDC, over 80% of them knew. They agreed or strongly agreed with the statement that their own data was going to be the thing that would catapult them to the next level if they were able to truly harness generative AI technologies. Now, one thing you're not going to see in this slide, or basically any of the slides in this deck, but I encourage you at the end of this, I'm going to give you my contact information. If you want more information about this next talking point, just let me know via email. But one of the other things we noticed was that a lot of professionals in commerce and other business categories want regulation of generative AI. And we have the data to back that up. They want regulation, and it's because they're waiting for that to feel safe, to go whole hog into doing this wonderful stuff that everyone keeps talking about when it comes to Gen AI. That being said, they're doing it anyway. And that's what this slide is about. What is the status of your plans to use the following data sources within your Gen AI models? They're already doing it, right? So they know there are real risks, security concerns. They know that there are a lot of unknowns about what tomorrow is going to look like relative to today. But still, 60% of B2B respondents, because one of the things you might notice, there are a couple things to call out. At the bottom of this slide, it says FERS Wave 2. That is our Future Enterprise Resiliency Survey. We do this on a cyclical basis multiple times a year. So this is fresh data from February of this year. And I've isolated it specifically to a B2B audience because they tend to be more conservative. So that, to my mind, makes these statistics much more impactful because it's the most conservative subsegment of worldwide respondents stating that they're already doing this. And for the record, the majority of respondents were from the United States and China, but there were also respondents in LATAM. And you can see that they're more likely to use their own data. Now, which models they're using, I feel like that's ripe terrain for future discovery on my behalf as a researcher. 54% of the respondents are using publicly available data. And this makes sense why these are the most popular categories if you really think about it, because it's data you already own, so you don't have to pay more for it, except for the maintenance, management, cleansing, et cetera, of it, the housing of it. And then, the one that's least popular is the one that is specifically bought and paid for. It's coming from data brokerage firms. And there's another reason why businesses may be a little hesitant to use that data for the record. And it's because who knows how long that's going to actually be legal and how that's going to be regulated. So it's really important to know why these stats look that way to understand how profound they really are. So now I'm going to dive into the heart and soul of this presentation, which are 4 assumptions that will get you to the next level of digital commerce. And if you still don't understand the concept of commerce transcendency, or transcendent commerce as I like to call it, you will probably understand this much more after I go through these assumptions, because the concept is huge. The first assumption is that advancements in generative AI technologies will continue to grow at an exponential rate. And it has been predicted by highly credible sources, that's the important part, that AGI will be on the horizon by 2029. And I know that there are probably a lot of skeptics out there, specifically if you have AI fatigue already, who may be a little dismissive of this claim. And I get that, I really do. I understand why, because so much of this is hype. It's overblown. And in many ways, the current state of generative AI is a little bit like a really sophisticated version of autocomplete, but it won't stay that way forever. Right now, it's a little bit like a party trick, you know? It does cool little things with language and code. But what you have to think about is that exponential growth curve and how this is going to transcend those boundaries. And the reason why you should take this credibly, and I'm going to cite Ray Kurzweil here, who many of you probably are familiar with already. He predicted clear back in 1999 that AGI would happen by 2029. And he doubled down on this in 2015 with a book, and then he tripled down on it this year. He's releasing another book and going on a press junket as we speak to really go into the detail about why he believes this is going to happen. And he's got a prediction rate of 86%, and he's had a long history of these predictions. In case you don't know who he is, he's a very famous pioneering AI engineer from Google. And so he's very much worth looking into. But another reason why you should take this prediction credibly, even if you don't always agree with these futuristic predictions, is because the bulk of it is based on Moore's law, which basically states that the technical definition is that the number of transistors that are on a single microchip will roughly double every 2 years while the cost stays relatively flat, minimal cost increases. This is actually Moore's law charted out. Thank you, Wikipedia. But I wanted to show you proof of concept. This isn't the only reason, though, why you should take this credibly, because it takes more than raw computational power to create AGI. As many of you are probably aware, it also will take a lot of talent, a lot of logic, a lot of data storage, a lot. So there's still a lot of unknowns that would need to come into place before we could actually make AGI a reality. But that's kind of irrelevant, right? Hold on, I'll tell you why in a second. Just so you know what I keep talking about, for everybody else who's not already aware, AGI is hypothetical at this point. It doesn't exist. It's a form of strong AI, and the reason why they call it that is because it goes beyond being self-healing. It goes beyond being self-generating. It has comprehension. It's self-moderating. It could be potentially self-aware enough to understand contextually when it's doing things wrong. So that's when things stop being a parlor trick or something cute that modifies text based on your inputs to something that can do all of this on its own. So unlike narrow AI, such as typical machine learning, which is still very powerful, very relevant, very necessary for business, systems like the AGI that a lot of futurists talk about can perform any intellectual task that a human being can. And so it's really important to know that. But another thing, again, I want to call attention to the translations, right? The translations may be awkward. That shows you how far we still have left to go. Because one of the things that I noticed, as someone who's very sensitive about translation technology, is that as I was generating the text for this presentation in Portuguese, it was literally mirroring the grammatical structures and the punctuation of my English inputs, which means it's still heavily dependent on what I'm putting into the system, which tells me as a researcher exactly how far we have to go. But like I said a moment ago, that's almost irrelevant. And the reason why that's irrelevant is that to become truly disruptive, the reason why you should pay attention is that to replace most human jobs and most of the software that those humans use, AI would only need to present a convincing simulacrum, an approximation of AGI, capable of reliably passing the Turing test. So just a little refresher on the Turing test. If it can fool a human, the human doesn't know they're interacting with the bot. That's basically the barrier, right? And so as you can probably imagine, in many domains, many forms of AI are already capable of doing this. This will happen, this simulacrum, before AGI manifests. And in some domains of customer experience technology, we're already there. Can it generate those outputs on its own? Can it be self-moderating? No, absolutely not. It's still very much narrow AI. But what I'm telling you is that even narrow AI can be something that is potentially problematic for you if you don't leverage it properly, and potentially could help you leapfrog onto the global stage of commerce if you leverage it well, which is why I feel like this is a particularly relevant conversation here at VTEX Day in Brazil. The market for traditionally siloed and specialized developers, marketers, and other CX roles will diminish over time. And the skill sets of the future will be very different than what they look like today. Because think about it this way, many commerce roles and the technologies leveraged in commerce are kind of victims of Conway's law. I know I'm introducing a ton of concepts here, but hold on for a second, because I want you to walk away from this presentation learning a ton about AI that maybe other people have not adequately filled in the gaps about, right? So Conway's law is essentially a rule of business where your systems and technologies are going to mirror the organization and communication structures of your business. So if you've got a big bloated hierarchy, you're going to need big bloated tech stacks. And what I'm telling you is that in the future, because of AI, that technology stack is going to converge to varying degrees, and your organizational hierarchies are most likely going to flatten as a result. But you'll be able to do more with fewer people in the loop, but those people in the loop are going to become a lot more skilled. They're going to need to be. They're going to need to be hyper generalists who are hyper skilled at a lot of things, instead of what we currently have, which are specialists who tend to know software for specialists in a very specialized manner. And just to take a moment so you can take a look at these, I want to dive just a little bit more deeply into what I mean about that hyper generalization. You're going to need to find people and treat them like they're precious. And that talent of tomorrow will have technical chops to be able to triage and maintain data models as they progress. They're going to have to understand the basics of maybe how to code a little bit so they can interact directly with systems that are not fully AI enabled. And they're going to have some kind of design mindset. You can already see a little bit of that globally, that there's been an emphasis for over a decade. And I think a lot of this is actually a derivative of Apple and what they've been so successful doing. Design matters, and in the future it's going to matter more, because the people who are interacting with these systems and running businesses, what they're really going to be doing is designing through the AI instead of putting in the inputs, instead of manually working in Photoshop and Adobe Illustrator to create art. It's going to become a lot more automated, but it's going to require a whole new skill set to leverage that properly. Assumption 2, the systems and processes in your company still need to care about the people in your company and your customers as human beings. It's what I consider sort of the grand paradox of all this really high-tech conversation. It's because you need to treat the people in the loop like they're gold, because customers will be harder to find. They're going to get inundated with messaging. Channel proliferation is going to continue, and you're going to have to find ways to really engender loyalty among those customers as they come into your orbit. But likewise, you're also going to have to treat your employees like they're gold, because the kind of generalists with high-tech skills that I just mentioned, they are rare. And they're definitely rare right now, because currently our educational systems are not geared for that. They train people how to hyper-specialize, which means there's going to be a gap between when people will be on the scene with the skills of today versus the skills of tomorrow. And when you find those people, you'll want to do everything you can to retain them. But before we go into that, let's talk about loyalty, employee loyalty and customer loyalty. It's not magic. It's not an app. It's not transactional. And if you design your systems, your processes, your go-to-market strategies from a purely transactional basis, like don't get me wrong, I'm a commerce analyst. Conversions matter. Money matters. Revenue matters a lot right now in the current macroeconomic climate, right? But the thing I want to really put on your radar is you cannot get cynical about those conversions, right? You have to achieve a balancing act between going after those transactions, getting those sales, and then also maintaining an ongoing relationship. You can't just leave CX out of the conversation entirely. It's still highly relevant. Many businesses treat CX enhancements in this transactional fashion. And they think that by investing in the latest whiz-bangs, it's going to solve for X. It's going to make customers more loyal. And in a lot of HR technology and a lot of technology for employee experience, it's about monitoring technologies and then, gauging their sentiment afterwards. I mean, no one wants to feel like they're constantly under the scrutiny of Big Brother. So it will take a little bit of time for companies to get the hang of this. The true nature of loyalty is the result of consistent positive interactions that compound over time. And you can't lose sight of trust. Trust is the foundation of loyalty. You're going to hear that ad nauseum in conversations about AI, but this is a concept that, again, transcends just the realm of AI. Trust matters in transactions. It matters in human relationships. It's the foundation of everything, and it's easy to violate. So it's very important to pay attention to that factor as you attempt to scale. And 27% of CX professionals indicated that they struggle to improve or evolve their CX practices. And that is specifically because, and this is CX professionals who were surveyed, who are telling on themselves. Over a quarter of them, said that the organizations they work for and their own CX practices were ill-equipped to be customer and human-centric enough to actually meet the challenge of their CX needs. CX and EX, they're all about experiences, and they're all about empathy delivered at scale. Commerce, like all of business, is fundamentally about relationships, and while it seems paradoxical, as I mentioned before, AI should be considered a tool that can free your internal teams, particularly on the sales side of things and in HR, to really focus on the humans in the loop. You can minimize frustration, and frankly, one of the things I'm looking forward to in the future is the minimization of agonizingly repetitive, meaningless parts of work. Because as humans, we want to derive meaning from our labor. We want to feel that we're doing something important for the world. And I know that's not just me, right? This is something that has been studied at great length in psychology. I think that it's very important to keep that in mind, that when you remove a lot of the manual box-checking exercises from commerce and from business in general, people can feel free to be proud in what it is that they're doing, feel a connection to it, and that helps build trust among your employees. And then likewise, when customers genuinely feel familiar, as in they don't have to continuously explain themselves to you. When they engage with you in a physical store, and then go engage with you online, and then maybe engage with one of your products in a marketplace somewhere, maybe engage with you on Meta, they're like an old friend. They don't have to reiterate what it is that they're looking for or the frustration they've had in the past with your competitors when they couldn't find it. In an ideal, transcendent commerce world, every single touch point would be a continuation of the last encounter, which is the promise of omni-channel commerce that is almost never truly actualized. Assumption 3, many of the technologies of today will become obsolete because AI is going to force a lot of these product categories to converge. And one of the reasons why I say that is because CX professionals are struggling to get leadership buy-in for what it is that they're actually trying to accomplish. And there's a lot of data on this particular slide. And I want to take a moment to highlight a couple of things for myself in English, and then I'll move over to the Portuguese translation so you can see what all this says. But in general, the organization And this is true of many of the organizations we surveyed in this particular survey, which is the future of customer experience. This is from last year. This is 868 respondents for this particular question. They indicated that their organizations were deprioritizing CX, which, by the way, commerce is a part of. Don't forget that. So this means the deprioritization of commerce as well, okay? They're deprioritizing that to focus on operational efficiencies on the back end to save money and maximize profit, because profit matters again. We're no longer in a growth at any cost world. And then the other thing that I wanted to highlight is that the legacy infrastructure of the technology stack that these businesses were using was impeding their ability to run quickly and to plug in place with APIs best-in-breed solutions for CX. And why this should be really eye-opening in addition to all of that is that very last one on the end, that little tiny 0.4%. Because we couldn't even get a single solid percentage of the respondents to indicate that they weren't having problems with their CX right now. I find that very telling because, again, this is highly impactful for commerce investments as well. There are multiple commerce market drivers. One of the things I want to highlight with this particular slide is what came from our future of CX predictions from last year, though they were predictions for today in 2024 and for the next 5 years. The prediction I really want to highlight is in the center because that's my brainchild, that by 2027, 65% of global 2,000 firms will reallocate 40% of CX spend on emerging products and skills as improved Gen AI renders entire software categories obsolete. And the reason why I say this is very personal and very specific to my own research, because as I mentioned at the top of this particular presentation, I research many different kinds of technologies for digital commerce because there's more than one way to build a better mousetrap. And it's really important to recognize that what I'm hearing from those vendors in CPQ, personalization, CDP, search and merch, all these other categories, and core digital commerce is this need for more pre-integrated platform offerings where they can get as much of that stack as possible from a single trusted vendor, and that momentum has only gotten stronger since I wrote this prediction. And when asked, they are definitely optimistic that they're going to be able to use AI, not just the product vendors themselves, because they're already doing it. They're building Gen AI into their products to try to be that platform of tomorrow, but the customers may not be demanding it right now, but they are asking people like me as a research analyst when I think this is going to happen because they want it. They want to see more converged technology that can have more centralized data models and can do more with fewer applications. Assumption 4, investment in modular composable commerce technology is essential for business adaptation in a rapidly changing macroeconomic landscape. That should not be anything new to anyone in this audience because we're at VTEX Day after all. But I want to go into just a little bit more detail about that. And just for the record, you might notice that I didn't use the word headless. That's because I consider headless just one way that you can compose a system. I feel like headlessness is essentially table stakes in many aspects of digital commerce, and almost all digital commerce platforms that are built particularly for mid-market and enterprise global commerce will have the ability, to varying degrees, right? Not all commerce platforms are created equal, but they will have the ability to let their users operate in a headless manner. The reason why all of this is so important and will become more important over time is because commerce technology is not going anywhere, okay? So when I say that some of these product categories may become obsolete, I don't think that's true of commerce. And it's not just because I'm a highly biased commerce-loving commerce analyst. It's because of the fact that there are too many heavily regulated complex parts of digital commerce that cannot be fully absorbed and taken over by AI, generative or otherwise. You might be able to build rules, right? But that's even more of a manual AI than doing something with Gen AI. And so the reason why you should really scrutinize your commerce technology is because you're going to need it to have a highly flexible data model and an ability for a high degree of composability and, frankly, decomposability. How well can you take things out of that commerce system instead of just adding things onto it? So rapid adaptation is going to be a requirement for the future because we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know what's going to happen with the technology. We don't know what's going to happen with the economy. We don't know what's going to happen in individual countries, territories, and communities, when it comes to regulation, sentiment, etc. And these things are going to evolve even more rapidly over time. Like with the technology I mentioned earlier, Moore's Law, it's progressing at an exponential rate. And a lot of people don't really understand the concept of exponentiality, but it essentially means really, really fast, okay? And that it's going to continue to get faster over time. And so it's really important to pay attention to that as you are planning your tech stacks for the future. Pre-composed and pre-integrated solutions can really accelerate this, but again, you want to really focus on the ones that will aid rapid deployment and modular internal architecture models that allow you to take things out as opposed to just adding things on. Because what you'll hear from a lot of pure play, best in breed commerce products, and I'm not trying to cast aspersions on them, there's a place for them too here in this conversation. But for this particular talking point, it's not necessarily a superior model to go full best in breed for every single commerce use case. And I think that they would probably agree with that too. So for many other commerce customers who are buying these SaaS products, it's really important to them that they have the flexibility to figure out which best in breed solutions are really necessary for commerce operations. And then when those solutions become obsolete, switch them out as necessary. And there are some real challenges that we're going to have to focus on now, tomorrow, and basically forever. The first one I want to bring to your attention is the need for ethical data governance and regulatory compliance. This should be nothing new, but in all these conversations about AI, it often gets diminished, or it's again packaged into something that is productized and then sold as an app. That is insufficient. Again, this is a place where the humans in the loop, particularly the ones with ethics training and legal training, lawyers, etc., they're going to be really handy for this part of things because this is going to become a quagmire. It's going to be very challenging to stay on top of this in a manual fashion. While you can leverage AI to make it easier, chances are you're also going to need a lot more people too, who are capable of monitoring these things as they progress. And one thing that's a personal pet peeve of mine that I almost never hear talked about is the proliferation of junk data that will be generated and ingested. But many of you probably can see this coming a mile away like I can, because if the AI buzz of today is all about generating text, generating code, that's data that's being generated. And it's not all high quality. Garbage in, garbage out. Think of what Gen AI, particularly things like ChatGPT, right? What were they scraping? Where were they getting that data to ingest and put in the model? Yes, for better or for worse, they used a lot of very high quality sources. And now they're facing a lot of backlash for basically, to keep the language gentle, borrowing that IP. And that's going to be an interesting development as time progresses. But the other sources were a little bit more questionable They were places like Reddit and online forums that are known for being essentially cesspools, where people are incentivized to fight and say inflammatory things to each other, to antagonize each other, to scare each other for clicks, to say things that aren't true for clicks. And again, this is narrow AI. It's not gonna know when it's saying something that isn't true. That's why hallucinations are such a ubiquitous problem in AI. And I think that it's very, very understandable why a lot of companies that are using Gen AI in their go-to-market don't want to address that elephant in the room, because they don't currently have the technologies to help you filter out that junk data. They don't have it. They also do not have systems that are capable of self-moderation, because again, that would be a much stronger version of AI than we currently have today. So if anyone tells you that they can do that when you're listening to their sales pitch, push back, ask for details. Ask to see how they're doing that. Ask them what they mean. Because one thing that I've noticed over and over again when I talk to commerce companies and everybody else in between is that they like to keep things excruciatingly high level, but they rarely want to tell you what it is that they mean. And I'll tell you about one kind of arguably kind of controversial example that really stands out to me. Anyone who follows my research knows that a pet peeve of mine is the phrase unified commerce. And I kind of differ with my friends at VTEX about this, but I want to make sure that I go on the record stating why. Because I feel like it's a really useful explanation, and I'll let you be the judge. But it's because, what does that actually mean? To me, that means monolith almost, or it's often used as a stand-in for omnichannel, as if omnichannel needs a rebrand. I know that that terminology has been around a long time, and it doesn't really sound as sexy as saying unified right now, because unified is the buzzword of the day. But again, what do you mean? Because questions about meaning will matter a lot when we're talking about Gen AI, when we're talking about technology, and particularly SaaS procurement. Because if you only go by the high-level talking points, every single company can do the same things, but they can't. And you won't find that out until sometimes after it's too late and you're over $1 million in the hole, only to find out that that product isn't fit for purpose. Again, that's why you need products with flexible data models that can let you do a lot with a single commerce product. And then that's the last thing that you need to really focus in on, as I mentioned. You want to seek commerce, software as a service, with a highly flexible data model. I know I probably sound like a broken record at this point because I've said it multiple times throughout this presentation, but when you want to know what really differentiates one software product from another, look at how they structure their data. Look at how well you can or cannot influence that data. How siloed is it? Do they silo the data models for B2B and B2C? Or do they erroneously or sometimes, fictitiously claim that they can do both B2B and B2C from a single commerce product, when in fact their product is almost always, from what I've observed, going to be specifically geared towards B2C commerce and won't have the proper data structures for account-based B2B commerce. And so it requires a lot of customization, a lot of consulting, a lot of third parties getting their fingers in your tech stack to customize things, to try to make a product that isn't fit for purpose right for what you're trying to do with your commerce ops. So again, the underlying data model of your core commerce product needs to accommodate any business model. This is the heart of transcendent commerce. It needs to be B2B, B2C, B2B2C, B2X, anything you want to do with your go-to-market and your commerce operations. And you should not be encumbered by the technology. You should be able to experiment on a massive scale with all of these business models and any emergent technology, AR or otherwise, that helps you accomplish your goals. And that includes things like marketplaces, right? Not all commerce applications are really capable of allowing you to host your own marketplace from the same product. And you end up having to buy third-party products at a premium price and third-party services that can enable that to work for you. And furthermore, your commerce product should be unopinionated about the APIs. Why do I say that? It's because you don't want your commerce product to dictate the terms of the other kinds of software that you integrate into your tech stack, and a lot of them do. A lot of them do. They won't tell you, but they do. And you won't know until you try to integrate something that they are giving preferential treatment to their partner network because it is beneficial to them to recommend those products. It is beneficial to them to recommend the systems integration firms that help them get all those products hooked together. So it's very self-serving, it's very cynical. It's not empathetic towards you as a commerce buyer. And if you can't or don't want to do a full rip and replace, which I would never recommend, and hopefully here you guys know that VTEX is one of those commerce products that is flexible enough to allow you to do the strangler pattern, so you don't necessarily have to do a rip and replace. But any true best-in-breed commerce solution should be flexible enough for you to be able to incrementally decouple it, to take things out of it, and to add things on as you wish. And again, I have to reiterate, that is not always the case with these technologies. So I want to take a moment to thank you so much for listening to this. I know it's been a long and exciting day. Hopefully you found some interesting discrepancies with the translations, because I would love to know from you who speak both languages, because I don't. I would love to know if anything really silly popped up, because to me that would be really fun. So please find me afterwards. I'm in bright pink. I'm hard to miss. And this is how you can reach me afterwards if you would like any more details or any more data about any of the topics I've discussed today. Thanks.